Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Way of Mastery. This is lesson number 9. All events are neutral. I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. This is going to be a little bit of a longer recording because I think it's such a powerful, powerful, powerful chapter. So it will be running a little bit long. I already know that, right? So let's dive in. Well, first of all, we start off with again, I start on my book starts on page 106. And we really start diving into, do a deeper dive into this idea that all events are neutral. And so there's some miscellaneous quotes throughout here where there's a paragraph down further that says, it starts off with, you are a literal creator in that moment. And Jesus is talking about this idea where he says that nothing can repeat it. That is why creation is forever now. So what Jesus is talking about is when you come into a moment and you look at a friend or you look at a tree or you look at a computer, that we have these thoughts on what those things are, and we bring those into the present moment. And he's starting to drop some more pebbles into this idea of becoming aware of what you're doing because of how powerful you are. And this idea that you might want to be careful, and instead of bringing something into the present moment, to just show up in that moment and just let everything be without sitting there going, oh, well, that's this, and this is this, and this is this, and this is this. In other words, just let it and allow it to be. Down in on page 107, the paragraph that starts, in this lesson, we want to address another of the important pebbles that you must drop into a clear, still pond of your awareness. It's simply this: all webs of relationship, all energy fields are absolutely neutral. All of them are. And so, and he goes on to say that all events are neutral. You are the one that places the value upon it. And then he immediately, which I love that he does this, because then everybody says, so you mean to tell me there was nothing wrong with the Holocaust or World War II or, the concentration camps, or when a small child dies of cancer, or, you just bring it all up. And then he addresses it, which I love. So he goes on to say, and then following paragraph that starts with, now, does that mean that one should become cold-hearted, unconscious, and blind to their actions? Of course not. Absolutely not. For part of the awakening means to realize one's interconnection with the web of all relationship. It means awakening a reverence for the mystery that is life, but it also means to release the judgment, right, of another who would view something differently, right? So I love it because he addresses it, because often someone says, when they hear about, well, then everything is neutral, then it's okay for this to happen and that, and we should not care. And it's like, no, that's not certainly been my experience whatsoever. On the following page, it starts off with just a great question. What do I choose to communicate to the world with every gesture, with every breath, with every word spoken, and with every decision made? I love that. I love that, right? Later, a few paragraphs down, Jesus talks about the idea of, when he talks about forgiveness, how many times should I forgive? 7. And Jesus said, no, 77. And he addresses that, right? He says, but if you forgive 77 times, and in each of those moments of forgiveness, you call into your field of energy that which reminds you of unconditional love, perfect peace, and power that transcends anything that arises in the world. Oh, so that's what he meant about forgiveness. Yes. He was trying to train himself to show up in any moment without any judgment, and so that's what he's really talking about when he talks about forgiveness. It's not it's not done in the traditional way. He was trying to let go of his judgments. And so therefore he used forgiveness as a tool of doing that. The next section of the book talks about look with innocence on what you value. And I love the question, the paragraph that starts off with, it's always wise to look lovingly to see, where have you drawn the line? So what is he really talking about? He's talking about, well, sometimes it's easy to look upon something and think, oh, that's loving, that's perfect, that's fantastic. We come to the church, we love each other. Oh, isn't this nice and great? However, then all of a sudden there's that thing, or there's those things where it's like, well, yeah, but we're not talking about including this, are we? And so there's the line, and we all have the lines. Hey, I'm guilty as charged, right? And I'm going to throw something out there to see where your line is, because I can name one right now that is just so incredibly powerful. And I'm just going to throw out the word politics, right? So it's like everyone's like, well, I'm okay with love and peace and harmony, except for this party or this candidate or this party or this issue. Oh, you mean it even applies to that, Mike? Yes, it applies to that. Oh my God. Really? Yeah, really. So I think it's interesting. There's the paragraph where Jesus says, be careful what you decree. Look to see where you emotionally enmeshed with a value that you have placed upon anything or anyone, or any circumstance, or any event, or anything like that. So there's work. There's work, right? This is the work. This is the work, right? On the following page, on page 110, the message is simple but very important. It builds on all that we've been shared previously with you. You are the creator. You cannot help but create. The question then is, what will you create in each moment? Great question. What do you choose to create? The next paragraph down, Jesus says, Christ's consciousness cannot be said to truly exist for you until you create it within yourself. That is so critically important. Who does this? We do it for ourselves. Really? Yes, we do it for ourselves, right? Your union with God does not even exist for you until you decide to open to the lived experience of it. Lived experience, lived experience, lived experience. We can sit here and talk all day long about this stuff, but it doesn't matter until you have a lived experience. And I just think it's so incredible. And then Jesus asks a very powerful question in that paragraph. Do you abide in a lived experience of these things? Right? And so I just think it's important that you are having a lived experience, that it's great. The knowledge is great. The understanding is fantastic, but nothing tops a lived experience. And that should be the goal. The goal should be your lived experience of your divinity. And that's what Jesus is getting at within this context, right? I love this. In the next paragraph, Jesus goes on to say, there must be something that you have valued other than enlightenment that you are insisting remains in your place of consciousness. What is it? Search it out, find out, and decide whether you still want it. And then he goes on to ask this question. What am I valuing? Or I wrote this question down in the book, which is, what am I valuing more than enlightenment? What am I prioritizing? Is it going to be hate? Is it going to be anger? Is it going to be frustration? Is that going to become my God? Or am I going to make Christ consciousness my God? Right? And so that's where we have to ask ourselves that question, right? I love on further down in the paragraph that starts, it's a short, in short, it's time to give up the pretense. It's time to begin viewing yourself from the perspective of an absolute ceaseless creator. Begin looking exactly at what you are creating in each moment of your experience. In other words, you're awakening. You're not going to live unconsciously anymore. You're choosing to live a conscious life, right? Bring the quality of a childlike innocence to what actually you're experiencing, not what you tell everybody else you are experiencing, right? And then later on, he starts giving some examples, and I think this is where the humor and Jesus really starts to kick in. When a bill comes in, look upon that as being an experience in the field of the body, in the emotional body, and that thoughts being held are in the mind. I made a note here because as a coach, to me, what this is a trigger. So often in psychology and neuroscience, we talk about triggers, and all of a sudden we have a situation or somebody says something or we get a bill in the mail, and all of a sudden, boom, we're triggered. And now all of a sudden what's happening in our mind is the neural pathways are fired up to this old pattern, and we get sucked into it immediately. Unconsciously, we're not even aware about it, but then all of a sudden we're there. And there's something we can do to break that. And what Jesus is talking about in this chapter is exactly that, right? So what do we have to do? And then Jesus, in the paragraph below that, asks the question, what thought must I have dropped into my pool of my mind to create the effect of lacking golden coins? Right? So what is the thought that created it? What could have caused me to be out of balance in this area, or the problem? What could have been there? What is the lesson that I could learn? What is the thought that I could possibly change about who and what I am? Right? And then he goes on to say, and is that the thought I wish to drop in my mind so I can create a similar effect in my tomorrow? Do you want to do it again? Or are you done? And my answer would be, I think I'm done. I'm good. Here's a doorway of wisdom. Do not create unconsciously and then just walk away, but learn ceaselessly from your creation. All right, I got to sit here for a minute. That's heavy. That's heavy. Here is the doorway to wisdom. Do not create unconsciously and then just walk away, but learn ceaselessly from your creation. What can I learn from what it is that's going on in my life? What can I learn about my situation with my health, my situation with this relationship, my situation with my finances? What can I learn from these relationships? How can I learn the lesson and move forward and get on with it? That's really what Jesus is saying, right? And then Jesus goes on to start talking about the power of your thoughts. And this to me is where I just get fired up, right? Because again, this is neuroscience, this is coaching, this is everything. This is what the Fillmores taught, this is what Jesus taught, this is what everything. Never believe that your thoughts are neutral. And he goes on to say, please listen carefully to this, that at any moment as you go along in your experience, you experience the reverberation, the coming back of the ripples that you sent out. In other words, what's showing up in your life were probably seeds that you planted a while ago. How long ago? Who knows? That's not the important thing, but they're there. And then he goes on to say that you're free to choose how you'll experience the effect of that ripple. So I think, really, if you look at the big picture, what Jesus is really saying is, if something is coming back that's showing up in your life that you're not exactly enjoying, and you can sit there and go, well, somehow I created it, even if I don't know how, it's okay. I'm not going to blame, shame, or guilt myself or judge myself for creating it. I'm not. But I'm also going to accept responsibility for it. And then the question is, okay, what if I don't judge it? What if I don't resist it? What if I just accept it for right now? Even if I don't understand it or agree with it, but I'm still going to accept it. Like somehow I created this thing. Not sure how, but I'll take it. Okay. And then what happens? Jesus goes on to say, if you experience it with unconditional freedom, unconditional acceptance, love, forgiveness, neutrality, innocence, you literally diffuse the effects of that ripple upon the pool of your consciousness. So this is the huge thing. That is when something shows up in your life that we're not comfortable with, that we don't like, that we're like, oh, this sucks. And there's this big wall that comes up and go, no, no, no. Take a deep breath, get grounded, and come at it from unconditional freedom, unconditional acceptance, love, forgiveness, neutrality, and innocence. You are innocent. No shame, blame, judgment, or guilt, none. Then you diffuse it. It's gone. And then you can move through it much faster without being stuck or having to repeat it again 17,000 times. Right? Jesus later on in the it says in the paragraph below, in any moment that you get it, you can stop reacting as if you were a victim. Again, remember when I originally talked about this in the beginning, when I was talking about this book, how you're going from being a victim to a powerful creator? Yes. So you quit looking at it as if you were a victim and look merely at the ripples that are coming back to you that you have sent out from yourself. And then you say, and by the way, the next thing that Jesus says, it starts off with, this has come into my field of experience as an awesome mystery. Yes. No shame, blame, judgment, guilt. It's a great tool. Keep that one. That's a keeper. Okay? Keep that tool. And then on the following thing, Jesus talks about the paragraph that starts off, therefore, why would you ever believe that God, who is but love and unlimited creativity and power, could ever beget something that is small and little and powerless? It does not happen. God cannot be victimized, and either can you. No victim, none. Therefore, God's creation remains victimless. And guess what happens when we're not a victim? We're powerful. Okay. All right. So then Jesus gets into the practice. And this is so rich and so good. But it's this idea of practice. And he says, begin now to utilize some time each day without letting a day go by in which you sit with yourself. And in that 5-minute practice a day for 30 days is what Jesus recommends, that you start off by acknowledging that you are one with God. You are one with something bigger than yourself. You're part of the divine. You're one with it. You're not separated. I am one with God, the divine, whatever language you want to use. So give yourself 5 minutes to practice sitting in a chair as an infinite creator of exactly what you are experiencing in your emotional field. How am I feeling about this? Okay. And you acknowledge, he goes on later, the paragraph that starts, but he begins with 5 minutes in which you acknowledge that you can create whatever experience you want as a feeling that floods through your awareness as a quality of thought that you allow to keep repeating in the mind. So again, Jesus gives us another tool. Starts off with I and the Father are one. It's a beautiful day. I've manifested a physical, right? So you can use that as a practice. And then later on in the paragraph, Jesus goes on to say, so many of you upon your physical plane keep searching for some form of magic that will bring the kingdom of heaven to you. So in other words, looking outside of ourselves to bring it to ourselves, that's not how it works. You cannot bring it to you. You can only become aware of how you're using it to create the ripples that send out from yourself. And then Jesus goes on to say that you're God's creation. You are in heaven now. Heaven's not a place. It's a state of unlimited and infinite creative power. So it's a state of mind because it's a reflection of God's holy mind. And then, beautiful question, why not be the one who practices being the presence of heaven? Great question, right? So Jesus goes on to further explain this process, many pages, right? And what I can just share with you is that the important thing is a paragraph. This is huge. This is really, really big. There's a paragraph that starts off, it says, here is the straight and narrow path that leads unto life. Here is the eye of the needle through which you must pass. We've heard about it's more difficult for a rich man to get into heaven than, or walk through the eye of the needle, or whatever the statement is. I think you know what I'm getting at. Here's the eye of the needle. For it is not enough to just embrace the idea that I am the creator of all that I experience. In other words, the knowledge isn't just, that's the first part, yes, but then you must then choose to actively put it into practice. Oh, wow. So we can't just have the knowledge piece. We also need to put it into practice. Yes. Well, how do we put it in practice? We sit down for 5 minutes a day and become the creator. Now, I'm going to further explain that a little bit because Jesus does. Further down in this lesson, Jesus goes on to say, it starts off with the paragraph, it starts off with this. And for me, it's on page 117. He goes on to say 5 minutes, one for each finger and thumb on a hand. If you would choose to sit as Christ in the midst of your kingdom, your creation, and you decide which thoughts you will hold. So you decide All right, here's the situation. How do I feel about it? Okay. So what is it? What could have been there? What thoughts could I put there that created it? Okay. So then you get to decide which thoughts you'll allow to begin to generate, or let me back up. I'm sorry. And then you decide which thoughts you'll hold. In other words, do you want to keep holding these old thoughts that created this mess to begin with? No shame, blame, judgment, or guilt, none. Or do you want to consider replacing those thoughts with more powerful thoughts about who and what you are and what you're wanting to experience? Oh, so I get to sit here for a minute, contemplate what's going on with my life, understanding that some kind of thoughts at somewhere, sometime, or someplace created whatever's going on. And that I can look at that and then decide to create different thoughts. Or as Jesus said, which thoughts you'll allow to begin to generate the ripples of the new that you'll send out that will return to you, right? Then Jesus goes on to give this beautiful explanation of this farmer, right? This starts off with planting the seed that produces the desired result. And he goes on to explain this metaphor of a farmer, two different types of farmers. One farmer, the majority of the farmers walk out there and they know it's springtime and they just start throwing random seeds everywhere. It's like chaos. I'm going to throw all these seeds, whatever. I'm going to throw these seeds. And then there's another farmer that says, wait a minute, I'm going to be a little bit more conscious about this. I'm not going to just throw any seeds out there. I'm actually going to start really picking what seeds I want to plant. And if you think about it, the representation, the metaphor, the seeds are just our thoughts. So then it's like, okay, so moving forward, then I'm choosing to pick the seeds or pick the thoughts that I know that if I focus on and I step into my power, then they will create, in a sense, my reality. And so that's the analogy that he gives them. And I love the analogy. It's just beautiful. And after that, he gives this, number one, I love the thing where he says, he merely followed the footsteps of wisdom given to him by God. Take my fruit and plant it in your consciousness. Take my thoughts, take my God thoughts and plant them in your consciousness. In other words, become like Jesus. Jesus had God thoughts. That's what he thought all the time, right? He was not separate from the divine. He was one with the divine. Anyways, I think at the bottom of page 119, the paragraph that starts off with, indeed, the entire valley was there, but one farmer that was wise. And then he asks this beautiful question, will you elect to join the union comprised of all the hasty farmers? In other words, throwing random thoughts out there, not thinking that you're powerful, not thinking that it matters, just randomly throwing a bunch of stuff out there and seeing what shows up? Or will you choose to take up the residence as the one farmer who knows how to create wisely and in faith rest in the perfect certainty and merely sits back to wait for the ripples of heaven to come and replace the ripples of hell that once you created unwillingly? Powerful, powerful, powerful question. I think it's funny. And then all of a sudden, he basically jumps and starts talking about everyone's a minister. You can not help but minister to the world in each moment, which is something I agree wholeheartedly in. It doesn't mean that you have to be like this and doing what I'm doing, but we each have our own ability to impact those that are around us, right? Just by being who and what we are. Anyways, so we practice this for 30 days. That's the goal. I did miss a couple of really, really funny things. I'm going to share with you. I kind of got ahead of myself, but these are so funny. I have to. So this is the one where Jesus talks about you're sitting in the chair practicing and all of a sudden somebody knocks on your door and it's a bill collector, right? And Jesus says, you could be sitting there and then all of a sudden you could say to yourself, oh, here I am answering the door. Yes, a bill collector. Hi, come on in. Have a glass of water. You're absolutely right. I didn't pay that bill. Do you want to know why? Silly me. I've actually decided to create the experience that I'm someone who can only create lack. That's why I have no money in my checkbook. It's just the darndest thing, isn't it? And I think to myself, oh my God, that is so freaking hysterical, right? Could you imagine saying that to somebody? Oh my God, I think it's awesome. And then another hysterical thing, and by the way, that's on page 116. And in my book, anyways, in the section that's called 5 Minutes a Day, the Foundation of Mastery. And then further on down, he makes another hysterical point, which is he goes on to say, I've learned valued unlimitedness. I learned to value love. I learned to value fearlessness. Yes, my method for doing was rather unique, and I would not recommend that you follow my footsteps, right? Unless, of course, you'd like the drama of being nailed to a cross and then stood up in front of all of your friends in order to learn to transcend fear in your own mind. Oh, he's just got such a wicked sense of humor at times. I just love that. I love it. So, anyways, I knew this was going to be long. So it's so good. So start doing this 5 minutes a day. What am I thinking? What am I creating? What are some thoughts that may have created this? And how would I like to replace those thoughts? Without shame, blame, guilt, or judgment. We don't do that. That's the power. That's the power. And so next time, we will be doing lesson 10, The Way is Easy and Without Effort. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Namaste.